Welcome to Between the Bytes. We're bringing you tech news and updates. I am joined today by two special guests, my co-host Derik Parkinson. Derik, how are you doing?
Good. I'm doing good.
And returning guest, regular on the podcast, James Fair, VP of Technical Operations at Executech. James, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Gary. Thanks for asking.
Awesome. We, surprise, are talking about cybersecurity again on this week's episode. And we're going to be diving into some kind of a different perspective. We don't have a specific attack that we're going to be covering today. We're talking more about ransomware as a whole and maybe philosophically, what does it really mean to be ransomware? No, we want to talk about today how do we really combat ransomware as a whole? We've talked about a lot of tactics on the podcast before. In terms of some of the software and hardware you can implement, some of the best practices, of course, but it doesn't solve the overall problem of ransomware existing in the first place. We're going to be referencing an article off and on today in this podcast episode in our discussion. We will have that article listed in the description. It's an article from The Verge, and it talks about really, like I've said, how do you stop ransomware as a whole? And it offers some potential solutions. None of them are particularly great, and that's kind of the point. So let's dive in. Let's talk about some of these. To get it started, it really starts with why ransomware continues to work and continues to operate. And the answer seems to be, like many things, money. There is money to be made in ransomware. That's what these hackers, these criminals, these organizations see. That's what they've narrowed down on. That's why we see more ransomware than we do other types of attacks. And James, you can correct me on this, but it's because ransomware is profitable and they make lots of money. James, I'll pass it over to you just on commentary on the money aspect in general. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Gary. That's 100% why they're doing it. They wouldn't do this if there wasn't money to be had. And that's kind of the gist of the article was, well, what if we stopped the method for which they got paid, right? What if we restricted those or stopped those somehow? And what would that look like in terms of the pain for the companies that are experiencing this right now? But yeah, it is 100% driven by money. A couple of years ago when ransomware really started to take off, it was because other criminal organizations saw how much money could be made and they also dove into it. And unfortunately, it's become a very popular attack method. The most popular, as you pointed out earlier.
Yeah. And it's funny, this article that we're referencing is only about a month old, and it's already referencing, it missed one of the biggest references of ransomware, which is the Kaseya breach, which set a new record for the amount of money demanded in a ransom, over 70 million, if I understand that correctly. And of course, we covered that on a past podcast. Lots and lots of money to be had in this. Let's dive in and talk about what this article suggests may be some solutions to the money problem, how to cut off the money in some way, shape, or form, disincentivize money making via ransomware. And the first thing they put out is immediate disclosure of ransom payments, making it a legal obligation for companies to say, we had ransom and we've had to pay it, or we're going to pay it. What are your thoughts on that?
It's certainly not a bad thing. I mean, and that's kind of what most security firms have been after, what the FBI is after. We need more exposure to this. We need more eyes on it. For a very long time, companies were hiding this data and probably still are. They don't want that exposed to the world. They don't want it known that they've been hacked, that their security wasn't sufficient. There's a flip side to that because, so let's say we take this initiative and run with it. Then, yeah, there's the downside, right? Which is hackers get more attention. And that's what they're after these days. They want more publicity. They want everyone to know that they stole your company's data and they're going to publish it out there for everyone to see unless you pay a very large ransom to prevent that. That's the flip side.
Yeah, I also see it being a difficult one to police or enforce. What government body, if this is going to be a law, what government body is in charge of investigating and finding out if some of these businesses aren't disclosing it? That just seems like a difficult one to actually track. It depends on the size, of course. If it's a big one like a Kaseya, it's kind of a difficult one to hide, but I think it can be an issue to actually enforce something like that.
Yeah, it's a good point. There's the money to run all this has got to come from somewhere. Help me maybe understand, James, a little more of what this would actually accomplish in practice. I think there's something to be said of consumer protection and consumer rights if your data has been violated or breached. I think that's it. But that's not what I think this idea is accomplishing. How would this idea of disclosure actually help prevent or reduce or mitigate ransomware attacks?
I think, I don't want to try to, say what Ms. Lopato's thinking here was, but the impression I got from her article was that she believed if everyone was aware of it, we'd realize there was a much bigger problem here, and perhaps we'd all take a little more action to do something about it, rather than just kind of ignoring it and saying, well, it's happening to them and not me. Yeah, I hear about it a lot, but I haven't been personally affected. So why should I do anything? Why should the governments get together and try to come up with solutions? Maybe it's not as big as we think it is.
That's a great point, and that's why we're here talking today as it is. More awareness and more education is a great first step to combating this. Okay, the next step, or not step, but another alternative remediation or idea on how to prevent that she goes into is to ban ransom payments. Again, as you've said, Derik, how would you legally enforce that? Companies need their data back, and desperate companies, they cite a statistic here, 1 in 4 pay the ransom because they're desperate, of course. But what would that look like, and is that even feasible? What do you think, James?
I think if we could somehow get everyone on board, maybe, right? But who's going to be the company that falls on the sword to be the ones that we decide, see, it's working? If we all band together and stop paying the ransom, yeah, they'd go elsewhere. There's no doubt about it, because they're going after money. So without money, they stop, going down this path. But like you said, according to Sophos, 1 in 4 pay. What about the companies that don't pay to get their data back? Are they going to be able to survive? I'll be honest, probably not. From the experience I have with ransomware, it's all in. It covers everything, and they have access to nothing, no customer data, no invoicing data, nothing that they're working on, no spreadsheets. So it pretty much becomes impossible to operate as a company at that point. So what we're saying is, okay, we're willing to take this step, but figure somewhere around a quarter of the companies during this period, while we make it known that we're never going to pay, they're going to fold, they're going to crumble. And what happens to those people? What happens to those staff? What happens to those, that's pretty impactful for a lot of families too.
Yeah, and what I'm curious about is, so right now there's insurance for things like ransomware. And if somebody is victim of a significant ransomware attack, is there an amount of money that can keep them afloat? Or is it just, it doesn't matter if you have, an insurance payment that comes through, you're still out too much important data or too much of your technical infrastructure to continue going forward as a company?
Well, and you've also got the PR aspects, right? So once you've let your customers know that you've been breached, how likely are they to come back to you? How likely are they going to renew with you? So there's a stigma that goes along with this, which is preventing companies from being open and honest about the attacks they're receiving, unfortunately.
Yeah, we see this on every level, even on just, the employee who accidentally falls for a phishing scam or downloads some malware. There's unfortunately a level of embarrassment that comes with it. And we as humans like to hide things that embarrass us. So on a company scale, yeah, it's a bit of a blow to your ego when you have something like this and it's something that you panic with. And then the 100% adaptation. I mean, how many times in our history have we tried to boycott something and it's actually been successful? With that 1 in 4, even if that drops down from 25% to 10%, if you still have 10% of ransomware victims paying the ransom, it's still enough to keep them going. And then what that does is it just makes things more severe for everybody else who's trying to adhere to the banning of ransom payments.
Great points. The article, of course, also touches on some of the things we've also touched on. Things like there's more to the cost of ransomware than actually paying the ransom. There's the costs, even if you're able to recover, even if you get the key, for example, to decrypt your data and get it back and pay, you've got to figure out how to cobble everything back together. And that is not a cheap process in terms of both technical and personnel resources that have to go into that. Again, this is a huge issue. Ransomware is a huge issue for this reason. It is so costly to businesses in so many ways. The next point that she brings up is around the method of payment itself. And there's a couple of different ideas here. Cryptocurrency, of course, is the preferred method that hackers, probably the only. I mean, I don't think I've ever heard of one asking for payment in other means, but it's because cryptocurrency is so easily untraceable. Cryptocurrency is not 100% opaque, can still maybe get through to it, but generally it's a good anonymous form of payment, and that's why hackers use it. So one of the solutions is just to ban it altogether. I think we can all see how improbable that is, as interesting as the idea may be. The amount of cryptocurrencies out there, I feel like there's a new one every day. I mean, there was literally a cryptocurrency based off of a meme. How are we expected to ban all of that, right? What are your takes? What do you think, James?
That's a great, yeah. Dogecoin's a real thing. And you're right. There is no doubt that ransoms have been in Bitcoin. You're going to get a different opinion depending on the perception of the person you ask, of course. I'm pro crypto, so you're going to get a pro crypto version if you ask me. So forgive that side of things here for a moment, if I may. The function of blockchain in the case of Bitcoin is that the entire ledger is open and available to the whole public. So every single transaction from the very first one to the very last one inside of Bitcoin is 100% traceable. We can see where they went and that. Now, there are some other cryptocurrencies like Monero, they're called privacy coins, which that's not the case. And you do see a lot of ransoms asking for Monero for that reason. In the case of the Colonial Pipeline attack, it was 4 million, 4.1 million. Because of the tracing ability through blockchain, the FBI was able to get back like 2.3 million of it. So it's not 100% hidden. It's not like that at all, in fact, when you start digging into it. Again, here's a pro crypto point of view, but I think a lot of people who believe that shutting down crypto is the right answer are because they really don't understand the technology or how it works, frankly. I think crypto is here to stay. I believe we're headed down that path and we're not going to go back. So yeah, it's completely unreasonable. And what about companies that deal in crypto? That's all they do, right? Coinbase is a US-based company, a massive one, just had their IPO recently. So we're going to shut them down completely because crypto is no longer a thing. It just doesn't seem like a very workable solution.
Yeah, I think we're much too late in the game to try and tackle something like that. You have people investing, like James said, at very large companies now. Yeah, crypto is what they do. So too late for something like this. It would cause some major damage.
Not feasible and would ruffle too many feathers, I think.
Oh, yeah.
It also sounds like we may need to do a separate cryptocurrency explainer. I know we've dabbled with that in the past in other formats, but I think for the lay listener, I still don't fully wrap my head around it. And so maybe it's worth doing a podcast just on crypto, but that's for another day. We're still a little bit on that topic, though, before we switch topics entirely. The other recommendation is stronger cryptocurrency regulation, which I know there's been a lot of people asking for that, especially with the wild up and downs of Dogecoin, of Bitcoin, related to some of these stocks like Tesla and GameStop. All of that sort of mess that's happened over the past, whatever it's been now, 9-10 months. People are asking for more regulation, which I always thought was ironic because isn't part of the point of cryptocurrency is that it isn't regulated. So again, the question is, what would that look like? And would regulation actually help in the ransomware space? James, what do you think?
Yeah, regulation's coming. There's no doubt about it. This is a huge new currency format, so there will be regulations coming. But because the ability of crypto to be off the record, out of the way, kind of hidden from everybody else, it does have to be done in a way that will work for everyone. And I don't think there's been enough research or time spent on that to really get an idea what that looks like. And then how do we get the rest of the world on board, right? Because some of these mentioned in the articles, the folks who attacked the Colonial Pipeline, they said they don't eat in Russia, which means they don't attack anyone in Russia, and they do it on purpose. They're probably there, or that's where they're housed, or they know that they're not going to have to worry about that group coming after them. So how do we get the rest of the world on board, even if we do decide this is how we want to go down? And, we're seeing this in China. China's trying to block crypto right now. They've decided Bitcoin is illegal. But that just pushes everything underground, really, is what happens. It doesn't stop anything. We know that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking is I think regulation is one thing, and I think it'll come through as this continues to be in the forefront. But I think the biggest thing is an education. Cryptocurrency is a victim of where it was created. And there's still people who believe that it can only be spent in the deep web or even the dark web. That's all cryptocurrency is for, is buying shady things on the dark web. So I think an education is a big one. So it's not a monster in the closet for everybody. The more you bring it out into the open, like James said, the less it'll get forced underground and then naturally used for shady things or criminal acts.
And let's not kid ourselves. Long before Bitcoin came around, attacks were still going on. People were still being exploited. Money was still being had, just a different method. It will still go on. And there is a real dark web, and those transactions go on all the time. And I'm sure that's not all in Bitcoin. And if we took away Bitcoin, they would just find some other way to make those transactions.
Once again, education and awareness are a key component to all this. And James, that's a good pivot point. Attacks have been going on for decades. Ever since computers were networked, there have been hackers, right? So this last point to me is also, it's something I think that should be considered. But again, how feasible is this approach of using international diplomacy and coordination to help clamp down on all of this? It's no secret that many of the recent big ransom attacks have come from foreign countries, from people based in Russia. Was it the SolarWinds breach? It wasn't a state actor, correct, James? But kind of might have been sponsored a little bit.
Yeah, the APT 29 group. Yeah.
So again, is this a feasible solution? There was the recent summit. I believe President Biden and President Putin kind of sat down and maybe was like, "Hey, quit bugging us, buddy." I mean, how does that really go? What does that really look like? Is it really effective?
I mean, ideally, yeah, this is the solution, right? The whole world just experienced a disease together. We all went through something together. We didn't really use it as a unifying opportunity as much as I would have hoped. But let's face it, the internet brought us all closer together. We hear news from around the world now. We're aware of what's going on everywhere else. To me, there is no better time, and there is no better opportunity, and there probably is no better solution. As I look at this and think, all right, how would I attack ransomware? If we're up to me, how would I do it? And the only answer I can see is we'll have to work together to try to ban these other people from doing that. And the only way we're going to do that is cross-border organization, communication, and collaboration. That's my take.
It's a good take and an optimistic one. I like it.
Now, for the pessimistic side, I I agree completely that this is the ultimate solution, but it's unfortunate, and I think anybody could kind of see that in a vacuum that would be great. It would work wonders. It would be the most effective way. Is it realistic? No. Countries like their privacy. I mean, if you look, just because we're here in the US, the three friction points we see are Russia, China, and North Korea. I don't see any of them honestly cooperating. Maybe a Russia, Putin might kind of cooperate, but always have something in the back pocket. It's kind of what I see. China, honestly, I don't know enough about that on the geopolitical side of how well they would cooperate. But yeah, that would be quite an undertaking, in which case I think you'd have something similar to the UN, where you have a good portion of countries cooperating and doing everything they can, but there's always going to be some people that just, or some countries that just absolutely refuse.
And it probably doesn't help that we're probably hacking each other too, right? All these
Oh,
countries
yeah.
would probably have groups of intelligence who are going after each other. So that's probably not helping in this process either.
Well, there was that story of was it South Africa?
Well, there was a story about the chips. They believe the chips also had secret code in them too for a while there. Bloomberg did an article on it, as I recall.
That was the other one. You're exactly right, Gary. South Africa had the same thing, is trying to say, here,
We'll help you build your new embassy and network and hardware. And the guy started poking around. They're like, wait a minute, there's all kinds of sniffing, spying stuff in here. And China's like, oh, sorry about that. Do you want us to help fix it?
yep. And I think it's like a perfect example of how any of this stuff honestly works. Phishing attacks, malware, ransomware. It always seems, except with some of these more sophisticated ransomware attacks, those are very intense. But some of these phishing attacks and malware attacks, they seem so blatantly obvious, but all it takes is one. You're just the right time, the right mindset of the victim, and just the right pitch. And yeah, it sounds like a great deal to anybody else, or in hindsight, you're like, obviously they have something that they're trying to get out of that. But that's how all of this works.
This has been a good discussion. Again, a great article that we'll reference. Are there any, kind of sort of wrap up thoughts that you guys have? Is there anything maybe that you would add that maybe there is another solution, broadly speaking, to ransomware? Again, we've talked about tips and tricks before, but are there additional steps we as individuals or organizations can take to help?
Well, it really comes down to that embarrassment point we talked about earlier. We have to reach a point where the ransom pain is greater than the embarrassment pain. I had a family member who got scammed, go buy me some gift cards, and she did. And she was afraid to tell me because she was so embarrassed about it and didn't want to be seen as dumb or stupid. And the truth is, this can happen to anyone. It is happening to everyone. It's happening to some of the biggest players with some of the biggest security staffs in the world out there. So we really need to get past this hang up that it's embarrassing or I'm going to be seen as bad if I release information that I've been hacked or I've been attacked. I think a much better approach is going to be, we got hacked. Here's what we did about it. Here's what we're doing to prevent it in the future, because we're all going to be experiencing this. And it's just way too high a number right now. And I don't see another path out of this. The banning isn't going to work. Yeah, I think some combination of all of these, minus the banning part, is going to be the solution. But it's got to start with, I'm no longer embarrassed to say something, and we all start helping each other out rather than trying to hide it and not helping each other.
In closing and in summary, as we've said before, if you personally or your organization is worried about your security posture, if something's happened, we got to get over that embarrassment, just as James said. We have tools, we have people that can help. That's what we're here to do, is to help organizations build their layers of security. We'll make the onion reference here because we got to do it. Building your security in layers in terms of protecting on an individual or on a local level is the best way you can approach it as we try and puzzle out how to deal with this on a macro, on a national level. Any other closing thoughts, guys?
I think the other one is incident response. That's where an MSP can really come into play. And if you're currently looking for one, or if you already have one, that's a good question to ask them is, what do we have in place for our incident response when the worst happens? What are the first 4 or 5 steps that we're going to take in the very short term, the immediate things? And then moving forward, what does that look like? And it should be all the way down to the employee level of, this is our issue and this is what we need our employees to do. And then this is how we're going to move forward, so that there's not panic. Because in that panicked mindset, we saw this with Kaseya, and I mentioned it in the last episode, is that panicked mindset opened the doors for a whole lot of other malware attacks, some little ones of people who were affected by it. You had these people claiming to be a Kaseya third party saying, hey, we have this solution, just click here. And it's just more malware or more ransomware or anything else along those lines. So the more organized and structured you are is what helps prevent just more issues and panic.
Yeah, very well said, Derik. Thank you. Just to color a little bit more what he said, an incident response plan is the way to go for sure. A breach policy, right? Every employee should know, what do I do if I suspect a breach or an attack? There's a lot of damage that can be done from the time, and we talked about this before, from the time someone sees something amiss till the time an IT person can get in there and actually do something about it. So we want to minimize that time as much as possible. Train all of your staff members. They should all know how, what the policy is if they suspect a breach or an attack. And then, not change the mindset. There needs to be an additional mindset. We've been so set on how do we prevent this from happening. And that's a great mindset. Don't get me wrong. We need to keep embracing that one. But we also need to embrace the one of, what do I do when I get hit? Or if we get hit, what do we do? That's a big one, because that's the part that most people don't prepare for. Well said, Derik.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for the discussion today. Thank you, James and Derik, for joining us here. It's been a great discussion. And as always, if you have questions or concerns about cybersecurity, please reach out to us at executech.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Have a great day, all.